Hi folks, and welcome back to another fly tying tutorial. So usually you would see hooks anywhere between size 14 and size 8 in my vise for these tutorials. Now the reason behind that is it's much easier for me to do a fly tying tutorial on a bigger hook. I can explain things better. But a lot of people, especially the Americans, say, well, we never fish in them sizes. So today I'm going to give you some hints and tips to tying smaller flies. Now this one here is a bug for the coming trout season and it's at size 20. So without further ado, let's get into it. The upside down hook you see in the vise is a Hanak H450 barbless hook. It's at size 20 and it's on a jig superb. Now one of the first tips I would say is they can be fiddly to get tungsten beads on. So what I've got here is a 2.3 tungsten bead, and sometimes if you just put it in the vise like this and then find the hole, which I'm trying to do, it's just easier if that's steady. Excuse my fingers. And it doesn't help that I've got all these lights pointing in my direction. So I'm just trying to find the slotted side so it goes round the bend of the hook. Once you've got it like this, it's just a case of turning it the right way up and then we can make a start to the actual tying. Now the bead here is from Semperfi. It's a gold and black mottled bead, and this pattern I'm tying, I've tied very similar in similar sizes for trout, but I just thought this would work really well. Now some of you may be thinking that the bead's far too big for the hook, but it definitely doesn't crowd out the eye, and I like to get as much weight for size ratio on my hook as I can. Obviously different scenarios whilst you're fishing you will need lighter hooks, but for the most part you're nearly not heavy enough to get your fly to the riverbed. So the thread I'm going to be using is the ever faithful black nano silk at 12/0, and as always, even with hooks this small, I'm going to add a tiny amount of super glue. Now you're looking at this through a macro lens, so it probably looks huge to you, but trust me, it's tiny. And I can barely see the fly. I'm just going with what I can see. So I'm going to get a little bit of a bump in behind the bead, just stop it moving around on the shank, and I'm going to come all the way back. Now I've used my rat's tail here to guide me to get that bed of silk down onto the shank. Now the first thing I'm going to add with this fly is some coq de leon. Now generally I'm not fussed about how many fibres I use, but when you start getting down to these very small flies, I always try and count exactly, so I keep them consistent. So I'm looking for 3 fibres. Bear with me while I count them on. There we go, I think that's 3, but I could be wrong. So I'm going to dress it up to the hook, and as you can see, my thumbnail or my fingernail compared to the size of the fly. Now I want the tail to protrude approximately 1/8 of an inch past the bend of the hook. Now I'm catching it in just on my side, and as my thread wraps come around, that tail's now moving on top of the shank. Now let's have a look at that. It's a little bit long for my liking. Just going to ease it back slightly with my strands there, which is easy to do when you've got this much material to pull at. I'm happy with the length. I'll come in and remove the remnants of the coq de leon. Now the next thing is the wire rib. You've got to go as small as you can. I've got some 0.1mm silver wire here, and I did have a bit on my bench, but it seems to have done walkabout, so I'll just take another bit off here and tie that in next. Now what I like to do with the wire ribs is push them up into the gap here. I want it to cover the entire body, and then I can use that to help me maintain a nice body shape. Now with this bug, and most of my bugs, I like to have a little bit of a cigar shape. If you've ever looked at any sort of entomology videos and whatnot, what you'll see is that the flies or the bugs, they are tapered. They're just not all one size. They do taper from the head. So that's looking not too bad. Just seems to be a wee bump in the abdomen there that I'm going to try and come down and just tidy up a little bit, and then I can come all the way to the top. Now with the turns of wire, I still want to try and get about 3 turns that's going to be visible to the eye. Not happy with that, I'll come back, and then again it's just not sitting right for me. That looks okay. And then I'll bring it up to just behind the bead. I'm going to catch it in with just 2 wraps, and then a couple of wraps in front of the wire. Keeping pressure on my thread, I'm going to just twist that away. So far so good, because disaster can strike when you're tying such small flies, but that's looking not too bad. Next thing I want to do is I want to protect the wire rib. I don't want it shuffling up and down the body. So what I'm going to do is give it a tiny touch of UV resin, and it really doesn't take much. If you were tying flies like this all the time, you would never have to buy another bottle of this again. It takes very little to get that coverage you're going to need. So I've just caught the ribbon. I've tried not to bring that resin all the way up behind the bead because I want that to remain able to take materials. I'll just come in and cure this. Yep, very often the answer when you're on the river and you're not catching fish, the answer is very often to get small, really small. This is about as small as I go nowadays. Sadly, I think I have got hooks at size 22, but quite literally they are a few wraps of thread in whatever wing that I'm tying on. I find it quite difficult to tie any smaller. So the next thing I want to do is add in my thorax material. And what I'm using is some of this, sorry, the label's gone on this, but it's a very specific dub that I like using for this pattern. So what I'm going to do is take out the tiniest amount. It's called SLF dub, and it used to be from a shop called Country Life in Edinburgh. Any of the Scottish boys might remember Country Life. It's well gone, but I've still got that dubbing. I only use it for these flies. So I'll just get a tiniest amount on. And even that, it might not look much, but I think it's maybe too much already. So I'm going to catch the first turn in at the bead. I'm going to come back for 2 turns, and then I'm going to come back towards the bead. And that's looking okay. Now, I have got this fly finished like this. I would whip finish it, put a little bit of super glue on my thread, and that nymph will catch you an awful lot of fish. But I like to challenge myself, so what we're going to do is add in a hot collar. I'll just come in with my whip finish tool and cast off the nano silk. So what I'm using for my hot collar is Glow Bright number 4, and it is fairly thick. This is thick stuff, so you've got to be really conservative with your turns on this. So I'm going to come in 1, 2, Now the next turn, I'm going to bring my rat's tail towards the bead of the hook. 3. So that's 3 turns in there. And then once I've trapped that in and I know it's trapped, I can come in with my scissors and just remove my rat's tail. Now I'm going to be very gentle with it. I don't want it unravelling. The next thing is to grab some UV resin, or super glue will work. It's not quite as good, I find, because we're only looking for really 1 turn of our whip finish. So I'll bring that in, and I can't help myself. I'm going to bring 1 more turn, and it might be 1 too much, but we'll see. 2 turns with my whip finish tool. Then I can come over and remove my floss. Then simply come in with the UV torch and finish that off. So there we go, my American friends, something smaller than a size 16, and there's my fingernail. It just about fits on that. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.